Hello everyone, today we will start chapter 4 of business studies, and the name of this chapter is business services. Now in this chapter we will learn about banking, what kind of services does a bank provides, then insurance. Now these two are the main or the most important bank business services. Okay, so let us start this chapter. Now, banking is perhaps the most common day-to-day activity of a business. Now, in today's world, every person they use bank for any purposes. Students should understand various aspects of banking services to equip them with a good knowledge base. Means you through this chapter you will know what kind of services banks provide and which services will be helpful for your business. Now let us start. Business services. While discussing nature and purpose of business, we understood that business involves those activities which are engaged in the removal of hindrances of person, trade, contacts, communication, place, transport and insurance, time, warehousing and financing, banks and financial institutions. Now in our first chapter we have discussed that business Business not only includes purchase and sale of goods, but it involves other activities like trade, communication, transport, insurance, warehousing, banks, and financial institutions. Then, business is not restricted to purchase and sale of goods, but also includes those services which facilitate, or you can say that which helps in making a business easy, trade easy. Okay, these services constitute service sector of business. These services, that is transportation, communication, financing, insurance, warehousing, etc., are also known as auxiliaries to trade or aid to trade. Now these services helps trade. Commercial services, also known as service sector, are indispensable for smooth flow of business activities. Now without these business services, running a business activity is very difficult. Now why do we need service sector? Modern trade is the symbol of modern civilization. It has crossed every barrier and reached even the distant and remote parts of the world. It has touched every man. Economic welfare of mankind has been made possible by trade. The physical distribution of goods requires series of interrelated activities which help in the flow of goods from the producer to the final consumer. Not only production or purchasing or selling of goods is enough. Means we saw that in today's world there are lots of industries or lots of companies working, but they are not properly able to reach every corner of the country. There are some places where people they have to travel a lot of distance to buy certain goods or some commodities. Now let us see why do we need service sector or how service sector was discovered. Production of goods is concentrated, but consumers are scattered all over the world. Means production of goods take place in certain particular area, but as we all know, there are people spread all over the world. Means even the farthest corner of the world there will be people, but an industry will not be present there. Then goods are produced in large scale, but the consumer purchase them in small numbers. Means goods good manufacturing companies they don't produce one or two units of commodity, but they produce in large number. But when consumer go for purchasing, they used to purchase in small quantity like one or two unit as per their convenience. Then there is a wide gap of distance. As I told you that industries are situated in a particular place, but the people who wants to consume those goods they are spread at a very large area. Then time is also needed. Then risk is also there, and knowledge between the production and consumption of goods is also missing in some places. That is why we need business or service sector in our day-to-day life. Now let us see what are the nature, features of or characteristics of services. Now every activity which has the following 5 characteristics is termed as service. These 5 features are also known as 5 I's, that is intangibility. Now in question if in exam, if they ask what are the 5 I's, then you have to write this one: intangibility, inconsistency, inseparability, inventory, and involvement. Now let us see each of these I's in detail. First one is intangibility. Services cannot be seen and touched, so they are termed as intangible. Means you cannot see or you cannot touch a service, only you can feel it or you can experience it. The quality of service can be determined after its consumption. Until and unless you don't consume that service, you cannot say whether that service was good or bad. It is therefore necessary for the service provider that it should be sincere in providing services so that the consumer can have a favorable experience and taste of services. Until and unless the service provider is sincere in providing his services, the consumer will not be able to say that he had experienced a good service. Now, treatment by doctor, pleading by lawyer, auditing of accounts by chartered accountants, these are all examples of services. And it should be noted that business services must have economic motive. Means until and unless those activities or those services, they don't have economic motive or profit earning motive, it cannot be said as business services. The next is inconsistency. Services have the characteristics of inconsistency. It means that services are performed exclusively for different customers in a different way according to the demand and expectations of customers. Now, when you see, let me take an example of a doctor. Means the patient that he is treating with, the treatment that he is giving to a particular patient will be different from the treatment that he is giving to another patient. Now, this is meant by inconsistency. Means the services provided to each and individual consumer will be different. It will not be same. Okay. Inconsistency in the services can be experienced in case of mobile services. Various companies are making varied offer to different types of consumers in different ways. Then third I is inseparability. The production and consumption of services cannot be separated. Both emerge simultaneously. In case of tangible goods, there may be time lag between its production and consumption, but this is not possible in case of services. Means production means the time at which the service provider he is providing his services, and consumption means the consumer he is receiving the service. Now both should be taking place at the same time. It cannot be separated. For example, when you go to a shop and when you purchase a packet of chips, now there is a time difference between purchasing that chips and eating that chips. You may keep that packet of chips for 1 or 2 days or maybe 1 or 2 weeks, and after that you can consume it or you can eat it. But in case of services, it doesn't happen like this. Now let me take an example of teaching inside the classroom. The teacher is teaching, means the service provider is producing the service, and at the same time the consumer, that is the students, they are sitting inside the classroom and they are listening to the teacher. That means they are consuming the services. So the production and consumption cannot be separated in case of services. It is possible that the service provider may improve the technology for rendering services, but the presence of consumer for the consumption of service is must. Now, it depends upon the service provider. Means they can improve their way of providing service, and that time the service production and consumption may take a certain time gap. Now let's say example, I gave you example of teaching inside the classroom, that was inseparable, but now I'm making these sessions and I'm uploading these things on YouTube. It is not necessary for all the students to listen to these lectures at the same time, isn't it? Means you can keep those downloaded sessions in your mobile phone, and after a particular period like 1 month or 2 months, you may watch these videos. Now production I have done already, but it depends upon you whether you have consumed it on the same time or not. So it depends upon me. Like I have used technology and I'm rendering my services in such a way that consumption can take place in the future as well. Now in your book they have given example like banks, they are providing their ATM services of withdrawal of cash. They will open ATM booth in some places, but it depends upon the customer at what time they want to go into that ATM booth and when they want to withdraw cash. Now sorry, next I is inventory or storability. Services cannot be stored for future consumption because they do not have any component of tangibility. In other words, services are perishable and no service provider can retain it. A good service provider formulates his policy in such a way that he has always an opportunity to render services. Means you cannot store your services for a long period of time. It is perishable in nature. Means after a certain time it will become outdated or it will become obsolete. If there is any tangible component associated with the service, that component can be stored but services will be consumed when these are provided. For example, we can purchase a railway ticket for the journey to be made after 1 month. Now you are going to use that service, but after 1 month the ticket can be stored for 1 month, but the production and consumption of journey will take place simultaneously on the specified date of journey, but the production and consumption of that service will be done on the date of journey. To sum up, we can say that there is no stock of services. Then the last I is involvement. The involvement of customers in the process of delivering service is a must. Until and unless there is no customer to receive that service, we cannot say that this is business service. It is the customer who has to experience the services. Therefore, customer cannot be separated from the services which are to be provided as per the desire, demand and expectations of the customers. So the presence of the customer and the service provider is must at the same time. In this case of inseparability, we saw that production and consumption cannot be separated. In a similar manner, the provider, the service provider and the customer cannot be separated from each other. Now, what is the difference between goods and services? Goods are produced while services are performed. Now we will better understand with the help of this table. Now, what is the meaning of goods? Goods are the physical product, means those goods we can touch, we can see, but services we cannot do that. They are intangible activities that provide satisfaction, or it may be linked with a product or another service. The next is nature. Goods may be standardized, means you can provide standard to goods and can be made homogeneous, means you can find similar type of goods, okay, same exact same goods, but services are heterogeneous, means they are different in nature because they cannot be standardized, means you cannot put standards on services, and services provided to one person is different than the services provided to another person. Then storability. Goods can be stored for some time and consumed later on, but you cannot do that with services. You neither store it nor you can retain it for future consumption. Then transferability. The ownership and possession of goods can be transferred, but the ownership and possession of services cannot be transferred. Now, a chartered accountant cannot give his experience, his knowledge to a person within a short period of time, okay. Then involvement of both the producer and consumer is not necessary, but in case of services we saw that customers as well as customers is much needed while providing the service. Then you can see example video cassettes, but for services like if you watch movie in a cinema hall, if you take medical treatment, all those things are services. Now let us start the topic banking. Now, banking is the process of accepting for the purpose of lending or investment of deposits of money from public. Now, banking is nothing but a process of taking deposits of money from the public with the purpose of lending, loan or investing in something else. Now, the amount of money that they take as deposit, these are repayable on demand or otherwise when the public who has deposited money to a bank, if they make demand, then the bank they have to repay it back. And there is another way of taking money back is by withdrawal through a check, draft, order, or otherwise. Now, banking, what they help is that they help in reducing the problem of raising finance and credit of a business. The modern banking system is also responsible for stimulating economic activity in the market by dealing in money. It mobilizes savings of the people and makes funds available to business financing. Earlier, the bank, what they used to do is that they used to take deposits of money from general public, and they used to provide loans. But modern banking, they are shifting, or they are increasing their activities. Now, what is that shifting? From urban orientation, earlier banks, they used to focus on urban areas like cities or towns, big towns. But these days, banking, they are thinking about rural places also. Then from class banking, means earlier bank, they used to entertain all the high class people, but this modern banking, they are focusing on mass banking, means they will not see whether the public or the mass of people, whether they belong to high class or lower class, but they try to include all the people of a place. Then from traditional practices to innovative practices. Innovative practices we will discuss in detail in next session, means all the innovative practices like agency functions and all those things. Then from short-term objectives to development objective. Earlier, banks' foremost objective was to provide short-term loans and all those things, but this time the modern banking, they are focusing on developing the economy of a country as well. Now, there are different types of banks. Now, first is commercial banks. These banks have been established to assist. Now, the main objective of establishing this commercial bank is to help trade, commerce, and industry in their efforts of their development. The assistance is provided by depositing their funds in various accounts, means the business or the companies, they can open account in bank and they can deposit their money in those banks and releasing as per their requirement and withdrawing whenever they want. In current account, overdraft facilities are also granted, means if a business or if a company has opened a current account in bank, then they will get overdraft services. Overdraft service means, suppose you have 5,000 in your bank account and you want to withdraw 15,000, then that extra 10,000 money will be given to you as a loan, as an overdraft loan by the bank. This is known as overdraft facility, but this overdraft is provided for only a short period of time. Assistance is also provided by financing, trade, commerce, and industry. What they do is a commercial bank, they finance these trade, commerce, and industries while raising funds for the company. Individual person can also open their account in commercial bank. Nowadays, not only banks but normal people like you and me, we can also open our account in commercial banks. In addition to the main functions of accepting deposits and lending money, commercial banks render various agency and other services as well. These things we will discuss in detail. Then next is agricultural banks. Agriculture needs both short-term and long-term loans. Short-term loans they can get short-term loans, they need that for purchasing seeds, manure, oxen and plow, and various other activities. Now, these short-term needs are met by cooperative banks, but when agriculture or when farmers, they need long-term financial needs, they cannot go to the cooperative banks. They have to go to the agricultural banks, because agricultural banks, what they do is that they provide long-term financial loans to the farmers, and those farmers, they need long-term financial needs for purchasing land, tractor, and other heavy equipments. The next is industrial banks. Industry needs long-term funds, so their requirement cannot be effectively met by commercial banks. Means industries, when they need long term funds, they cannot go to commercial banks, because the commercial banks, they will not be able to provide that much amount of loan. So in that case, and so that in sorry in that case, industrial bank, they have been set up to meet the financial requirements of industrial enterprises. But in India, we do not have much industrial banks. In place of industrial banks, we have industrial development bank like IDBI and all those, and various financial corporations to meet financial needs of industrial enterprises. But in Western countries like US and UK, they have industrial banks. Then next is exchange banks. These banks help in the payment of foreign trade. These banks also help commercial banks provide exchange services also. Sorry. These banks also help in the financing of foreign trade. Means if you are a businessman and you are dealing internationally, then suppose you have client in USA, then the client of yours will make payment in dollars, but in India we have rupee system. So exchange bank, what they do is that they help in exchanging foreign currencies. Now in India, there are certain banks like Bank of Tokyo, Greenleaf Bank, Chartered Bank, etc. These banks deal in foreign exchange, mean foreign currency. The next is indigenous banks. Now indigenous banks, they are traditional banks, we can say that. Before independence, financial needs of farmers and small business units were met by indigenous bank in rural areas. Now these indigenous banks are no one but say sahukars, mahajans, sardars, etc. Those people, they used to provide loans to the farmers and small business units, and in return they used to charge very high rate of interest. The working of these banks is so simple that farmers and borrowers may approach them at any time. They used to provide loans to anybody, any farmer. Then borrowers have to pledge their ornaments while taking the loan amount. What they have to do is that they have to keep their ornaments, land, or very valuable for borrowing fund. These banks are virtually exploiter of poor rural people. Means they used to exploit rural people by charging high rates of interest. In spite of our development in financial fields by establishing big banks and financial corporations, but still there are some places in our country that indigenous banks are still serving. Means they are exploiting the poor farmers still now. Then sixth is central bank. In India, Reserve Bank of India is known as our central bank. Now every country has a central bank responsible for overall control of cash and credit money in the company. Now in India, Reserve Bank of India, what they do is that they control the cash flow or the credit, means the loans and all those loan rates and interest rates, they are handled by Reserve Bank of India. Now Reserve Bank of India, it was incorporated on April 1st, 1935 as Shareholders Bank. Means while starting that bank, it was known as Shareholders Bank. Means there were shareholders. Majority of shares were held by the central government. But after independence, Reserve Bank of India was nationalized on April 1st, 1949. Now tomorrow we will see some important functions of Reserve Bank of India, but for this session we will wind up here. Thank you.